Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am so excited to be here on this great topic and conversation. I'd like to introduce our wonderful panelists that we have to speak on our key trends in public relations. I'd like to start with Karen Ovseyevitz. Karen comes to us with more than 25 years of experience in public relations. She is the founder and managing director of Novelli in Mexico. She is responsible for developing the Latin American network and operations for 18 Novelli offices and agencies in the region. Quite an extensive experience and background in the region. She has been part of the Mexican magazine expansion Top Women in Business for 4 years in a row. Karen brings to us lots of experience and expertise in this area, and we're really excited to have you with us, Karen.
Thank you, Amelia.
Next we have Ciro Reis, has worked as an economic journalist for some of the main Brazilian publications before founding his own PR company, Imagem, Corporativa, in 2001. He also in 2017 founded a second company called Walk for Good, focused on social impact and sustainability projects. Ciro was president twice for Abracom, the Brazilian Association of PR companies, which had over 150 affiliate agencies. He's the incumbent global chairman of PR Worldwide, the biggest global network of independent PR agencies, which comprises 83 partners in 55 countries. In addition, he's also a member of PRSA LATAM, and also a board member of the International Communication Consultancy Organization, where he represents Brazil. Welcome to the group. Thank you. We are so excited to have you, Ciro.
Thank you.
And joining us as well is Melissa Vela-Williamson. She is an award-winning communicator with over 18 years of general market and multicultural internal and external communication experience in agency, corporate, and nonprofit settings. She's the chief communications architect of her firm, MBW Communications. She is the first national columnist for the Public Relations Society of America, or PRSA, to ever focus on the Hispanic Latino market in the United States. She hosts the industry-focused podcast, Smart Talk Series. During her career, she has directed public relations, marketing, advertising, or social media strategy for over 68 organizations and led workshops for major organizations such as sports organizations as the San Antonio Spurs. She has been featured on regional and national panels for PR News, the PRSA, American Marketing Association, Hispanic Public Relations Associations, and many more. Welcome, and thank you for joining us, Melissa.
Thank you.
Well, we are going to just jump right in because we have some exciting information to hear. First, we're going to start with you, Karen. Please share with us some key trends, the top 2 trends. We can't wait to hear from you about what you're seeing in Latin America and from your perspective for the PR industry.
Sure, thank you. And thank you for having me here. It's always exciting to talk about trends. And in a year like 2022, where there's so much still uncertainty and things happening, and 2021 was a challenging year. So I think just thinking about the trends and how we can all adapt to these trends is super, super exciting. So let me share with you a couple of the things that I'm seeing in the region that I think are both trends, but are big opportunities for us communicators. The first one that I want to talk about is sustainability and purpose. Sustainability many years ago was like a good to have thing in Latin America. Companies opted in and out and chose how to navigate their sustainability programs and sustainability commitments. But I saw last year a huge pickup on the way that companies are thinking and working around sustainability and purpose. We did a lot of research in the region, and we are seeing that consumers want businesses to live with purpose. Consumers are really asking for companies to do more things and to benefit people and stakeholders and communities, and not think only about making money. So we saw both the sustainability and purpose topics really becoming very relevant to businesses in Latin America. So the way that I see communication working on these topics is that companies have to start talking and thinking differently about themselves in terms of their corporate social responsibility, their environmental sustainability, and their social impact. So we saw, and I think this will continue this year, an increased interest of companies or from companies to using communication to really drive strategic planning and execution related to all purpose and sustainability topics, because they know that this is something that will impact their reputation and ultimately the stock value, to be honest. So we are expecting to see more and more clients asking us to work on, sustainability messaging, training, communications, both inside and outside the company. So I think this is going to be a huge opportunity. We are going to be working with, besides, the chief operating officer or chief marketing officer, with the chief sustainability officer across organization. So it's a great opportunity for us and our teams to really expand our reach and the area of knowledge and work with different and new stakeholders. So I'm going to leave it there. And I know Ciro will talk more about this, and we can then discuss. So this is my trend number one. Then if I move to the second trend, I think this is super exciting because it's the way that internal communication is getting a lot of relevance in organizations. I think the pandemic has really, shown us that everything is uncertain and companies need to adapt and respond to the reality of the environment. And I think it has shown some light of how important our workforce is, how important our people are, and how important it is to keep them engaged and motivated. There's been a lot said about, the great resignation and the way that companies have lost a lot of great talent. And I think companies are becoming more and more resilient and more reliant on internal communication to keep their people motivated and engaged. So last year we saw a lot of a race on the internal communications work, both from crisis communication to motivation to creating a virtual culture, which is super challenging. So I think that the pandemic really brought internal communication to a new level. I think we have become part of the C-suite in many organizations where you see the CCO working alongside the top leadership in the organization. So I think that the back to work and let's say the new normal will be a good opportunity for companies not only to rethink their internal communication, but to really revitalize their communication and their style. So that's my second trend.
I think you're absolutely right, Karen, and I can't wait to dig into those. I think, Melissa, your two topics are going to be kind of really transitional and related to that. If you could talk a little bit about what those are and kind of get us excited about how those relate to what Karen has just shared. And then Ciro, will go to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, it's a great transition from Karen's points, and they were great, Karen. I wrote them down. So my perspective's coming out of the United States. I'm based in San Antonio, Texas, which is a majority Latino and Hispanic city. So we are the dominant culture here. And but our experience as Latinos and having ties back to parts of Latin America is always very complicated, as we like to say in PR talk, right? But the two trends that I see, just like Karen was saying, that really with internal comms raising in prominence, a lot of that is underlined by my points, which I brought some visuals for just because they are a little complicated again. Since we're recording, thumbs up. Does it look okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Great. So my trend number one that I wanted to mention is that increase, an acceleration of embracing integrated marketing communication by PR pros. I think that if you'd been in PR for a couple decades, you may have focused or specialized on one part of communication, like media relations, right? There is a model called the PESO model, which stands for paid, earned, shared, and owned types of media or channels. And what Karen was talking about with internal comms, like a lot of that is owned, things that we can create, content and stories we can create, shape, mold, design. And if they're on our websites or a podcast we own for our organization, no one can change them, right? We have control over those pieces of media, where for such a long time, PR was always tied so closely to media relations. And we know that we earn those stories, we earn that coverage, and we can't really control the end outcome of that work. And sometimes it can, change, but there's always been a pressure and kind of a sexiness to media relations. And so our organizations always really work and look to us for help there. But with the news hole, it has changed so much, at least in the States, where when the pandemic hit, we had already been moving towards this 24/7 type of news cycle. But when the pandemic hit, talk about like timeliness and topic, like everything came off the books, all the feature stories and proactive and different ideas. The beats shifted for journalists, and almost everyone was covering pandemic news. And then we had a lot of social unrest with some really unfortunate incidents here in the US, and DEI rose in prominence as well. So if you have a good embrace of integrated marketing communication, telling one story, and like I have in this wheel graphic, right? If your communication plan or if your story is at the heart of what you do, and you think about how do I tell that story on all parts of that paid, earned, shared, or owned model, like what does that look like on my website? What does that look like in our brand? Is even the name of our organization still representative of what we do today and who we are? What does that look like in advertising? And we better have budgets for advertising, particularly on social, because social is a shared channel. We don't own those properties. And some companies put a lot of an investment of time in those channels, but not the money that they need to have their content seen. And always starting with what you control and making sure that website's up to date is a great place to start for most pros, and it's often forgotten. My agency is called in for a lot of special projects or milestones or communication confusion. And so often we go, your website has broken links and old information and even old staff members on there. Like, let's start there and grow the campaign from there. But it's really helpful when we can't really count on the news cycle and the journalists and things that were newsworthy before. It's so unpredictable. We have to make our own. We have to broadcast our own stories, and more of that's happening. And then tailoring our approaches kind of leads us into my second point. And the second strategy I've really seen trending in the US, at least, is looking at what is our strategy in regards to the culture of people. So often as marketing and communication pros, we've really thought a lot about, oh, what are the demographics, right? Women like this, and men like this, and white men like this, or Caucasian. We can't even all agree on the terms in the US of what we want to call someone from, Mexican heritage, for example, right? We have Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx. Like there's a lot of things happening here in the US in terms of that. But one thing that I've really saw, and I see a rise in, is this call for us to think about people a little more inclusively based on values. So there is a consumer behavior expert named David Allison that I'm reading about and studying about for a book that I'm writing about PR and cultural strategy. And I really love his idea of value graphics and really reaching people based on the values they have, because that's so closely related to their cultural practices. And what that looks like and all the data he has is fantastic. And look him up and look on that website, because worldwide, for example, togetherness or being in relationship with people is the top value across the world. But if you want to reach Americans, for example, the value set is different, right, than maybe some of the Latin American communities. And being able to speak to those values make people feel like they're connecting with your message right away. So that's the second trend I wanted to bring up.
That's really great, Melissa, especially that different perspective, because I know that, a lot of professionals in, right now we are in a global world, right? So it doesn't matter if you're based in Latin America or if your client is, we are working to, our clients are working in both Latin America, North America, or trying to reach customers in one or the other. So it's important to have those different perspectives and understand how they impact and affect each other. And it is sometimes it is very complicated.
Mhm.
All right, so Ciro, tell us a little bit about how you can bring all that together, because I know you have some really great insight into those key trends.
Okay, so we have heard so far many interesting inputs, and I'm used to say that before talking about PR, we do need to talk about BP, meaning the big picture. I see that because sometimes we are so focused on our technical skills and, social media, how to use artificial intelligence for PR projects. And, we have nowadays sophisticated many alternatives to release information, to build campaigns. But I think that, first of all, we need to think about that big picture because we are living in such a changing world, especially after the pandemic, that we do need to become more and more, let's say, consultants. We do need to understand the different variables that are on the table. We do need to understand the geopolitical challenges, the social impacts in the different societies. We do need to decode and understand different cultures in order to, to connect the dots, to build our puzzle in order to be a real good communication professional. One of my favorite jokes is that 5, 6, 7 years old, as a PR professionals, we had a puzzle with 10 pieces. Now our puzzle has 500 pieces. So it's much more complicated. We need to be really good, better and better professionals in order to connect all those dots. And I think that this rationale comprises the idea of looking to ESG topics, diversity, equity and inclusion, climate change, geopolitical challenges, as I mentioned before. So there are, we do need to make our repertoire bigger and bigger. And which is a second thought, which is as important as the first one, is how to bring the right people on board, how to get the best talents. It's not easy. For example, in the US nowadays, you see more and more agencies are struggling to hire people. And the good professionals, they are in a very comfortable position because they can ask for higher salaries, and they can even say, well, and I prefer to work from home, okay? So it's a permanent challenge. Look into the big picture and having the right people, and being able to decode the complexity of the global society we are living in. As you mentioned at the beginning, I'm the global chairman of PRY. We are a global network of independent agencies in 55 countries, 83 partners. So you can imagine the cultural differences and the different approach and the different ways of doing PR according to each specific market, and the need we have to understand each other and develop common projects and working together on an international basis to implement projects in different markets for a given client. So I think, long story short, we need to be more and more intelligent in terms of looking to different places at the same time, looking to the right people, and being aware that everything is changing every single minute.
I think you said it perfectly. Ciro, it's so true that especially the talent piece that you mentioned, those, I think everybody must be really feeling the heat. The Great Resignation is not just a term in the US, I think it's everywhere. And there are a lot of reasons why. And so I think sociologists and scientists will probably be studying that for years to come. So there will be books about that for sure.
Well, Amelia, and on that point, just to add to that is I think a lot of what we've been talking about highlights this idea of people really having an opportunity to take a moment and figure out, am I living a purpose-filled life? Like I've been going down this path, or I've been working in this career, or I've been at this job for how long, when everything got thrown upside down, like, is this how I want to stand back up? And so there is some of that, right? But I think that the ability for us to embrace remote work, but overall, it's this idea of how fluid are we as professionals? How agile are we as professionals? And as PR professionals, I feel like we've been just ballerinas, like pivoting all over the place. And I don't think that will stop. That is our new way of being.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. And I think that brings back to what Karen's key trend was about consumers and customers and even employees want to work and purchase and support companies that are purpose-filled, right? And so my first question is for you, Karen. What can PR professionals, the ballerinas, as Melissa has called us now?
Yes, I love it.
Yeah. You know, what can PR professionals do to ensure that brands, you know, that they move beyond just the talk? This is something we deal with all the time, but and move more into those measurable action, right? I think that's really important. How are you guiding that your clients, and what can we do as PR professionals?
Sure. So I think that there's, you know, a global trend, and then there's Latin America. I'm going to compare a little bit about both regions. I think that Europe and the US are a little bit ahead of Latin America in companies understanding the need and the importance for a purpose-driven really leadership and organization. I think in Latin America, we're making strides, and some companies are really, really moving the needle. We as communication professionals, I think we need to help our clients close the say-do gap and really helping them mapping out where they are today, where they want to go, and how communication and PR can help them get there. It's not, and I totally agree with Ciro on the way that we are now a little bit, in Spanish you say todólogos. It's like you're an expert on everything and you need to be an expert on everything. I don't think we can be experts on everything, but I think we need to understand all of the nuances around us. So our responsibility as PR professionals is really to drive the organizations to talk and develop that narrative, to develop those stories that can help them move the needle and move from what they're saying to what they're actually doing, and to hold our leadership accountable. Because one of the things Melissa was talking about, you know, the new generations wanting to be on, to have a purpose beyond just going to a job, you know, to an office and sit there for 10 hours. They want to feel they're doing something. So they want to work with companies that are doing something. And the leaders that are thriving in the region are the ones that are being extremely transparent about their plans and their progress against the plans and the challenges they faced in that journey. So I think we have a great opportunity. I think, as I said at the beginning, that communication is becoming part of that C-suite, and that is because of something, and that is because I think companies are realizing the power and the influence that communication can have in meeting those goals.
I think it's interesting that you said that the US or North American and European companies are further along than Latin America, especially because of what Melissa said, that in culture, as a culture strategy, what people want is relationships. And I tend to think that what we have in Latin America, from my own experience in Argentina and in Mexico, what we bring to the table in Latin America is our strength in relationships, right? When I had to work with my partners across the border in previous work, that was the strength, that I could call on my partners and my relationships, even if it had been months. That is the togetherness that. So it's interesting that, though, that's the one thing where we're still struggling in Latin America. So I wonder, that could be something that we noodle on, but
yes, and just to add, we just did a research in Brazil. It's called Purpose Premium Index, and the data told us that 81% of Brazilians would prefer to get related to a company that does something beyond making money. So I think the need is there. I think the hunger is there. I think it's just about companies really, understanding the importance, reading and listening to their consumers and their customers, and understanding that this is a path forward, but because this is the way they're going to win in the market and be able to recruit the best people.
Well, and then touching on recruiting on the best people, I want to go to Ciro. What do you think is the main barrier facing Latin American PR industry? Is it to become strategic advisors for business? Is it talent? Is it training? What do you feel is that barrier? I mean, because I think Melissa would say we have sometimes the same barrier, but tell me from your perspective in Latin America.
So I think that the main barrier is not in the PR field, it's in the macroeconomic scenario. Because, I'm used to say that in Latin America, we are used to live with ups and downs. It's a permanent roller coaster, So talking about Argentina, for a couple of years, Argentina is doing great. And 2 years after, the country goes down. The same in Brazil, the same in Peru, in Colombia. I was checking my files before our presentation here. Latin American countries are facing or have faced last year, 2021, the first inflation in many years. In Argentina, the inflation was 50%. So 50%. So it was the worst inflation in 30 years or 20 years. In Chile, it was the worst inflation in 14 years. In Peru, the worst inflation in 13 years. In Brazil, 7 years. In Mexico, 20 years. So the macroeconomic issues are, in my view, the main barrier. Because whenever that happens, companies, clients, they say, wow, you see our problems here with the public deficit or with budgets, with the inflation, with, interest rates, the dollar. And so this macroeconomic scenario for me is the main barrier, because we have great professionals, PR professionals in Latin America. I travel all over, so I know people, I know agencies. We have no, skill problems. But when you compare with US or main European countries, so there's a huge difference. I was talking to a colleague in Chicago this week. When I gave him this picture of inflation, he told me, wow, and we in the US, we complain when we have 6-7%. Wow. So it's another reality. So whenever the region started to move on in a consistent economic way, I think that the PR market will evolve very quickly.
It sounds like similar to when an industry evolves. So similar to Karen, what you were talking about, ESG, or even the pandemic. What those opportunities have done is opened opportunities for the pandemic, really brought internal communications to the forefront, right? It is no longer a neglected area of the corporate communications function. It is probably the most important in any company, right? Because of the workforce, mental health, the Great Resignation, all of those things and more. And then ESG, or for those who don't know what that stands for, the environmental, social, and governance, which was in the past CSR, corporate social responsibility, or what we've been talking about, purpose-filled. Those new trendy topics in business has opened the door for a new PR area, right? So I guess, Ciro, what you're saying is, if like when water rises, all boats rise too, right? So that sounds like, so as the economies in Latin America do better, so does the industry, and it opens the door. Yeah, Melissa.
Well, Amelia, I mean, I'm over here going, because, a lot of what I've been writing about professionally has been to other pros, and we call them people of color here in the US, but those from, Latino backgrounds, Hispanic backgrounds, Black, African-American, Asian, Native American. And what I've been finding through years of research and then experience working with different groups, both from PR and diversity, equity, inclusion work, and all that's kind of coming to this very finite understanding that I have now that, we have barriers in the US in terms of PR people being from backgrounds like mine, right? Being from a Latino heritage or Hispanic, or however they want to identify. That lived experience here in the US is different based on how many years you've been here, how many generations you've been in, what language you speak or don't speak. We were speaking offline on whether or not I spoke Spanish. And I said, I'm embarrassed to say that I'm not fully bilingual, but that was a ramification of my mother being shamed for speaking Spanish when she was growing up, and the horrible things they did to segregate those from the Mexican community back then. And all that to say is what I'm still seeing in the US in terms of public relations and a larger marketplace dynamic is that people from these historically marginalized or disenfranchised backgrounds, or just a little different, if they come from certain cultures, they tend to have a collectivist culture, which means they think of the benefit of the group versus their individual needs or achievements themselves. And so for Latinos, that means a lot of us think of our first group is family. So we're very family first, we're very relationship based, but in terms of getting the education we need, being individualistic enough to try something new, go to a college out of town, whatever that may be, when you're changing that family tree, there's a lot of pressure to conform in ways that I don't think we've really identified before. And that does impact how we do economically and our well-being and what we feel like we have the right to ask for. So what I'm really working with pros on in PR is encourage in a special way. We almost need an invitation from people with collectivist culture backgrounds. When you see that they're very humble. I mean, I even did it myself with Amelia when she asked me to be on this panel. I said, oh, I'm sure there's someone better. I don't have, oh my gosh. And I just laughed. I said, I did it myself. And I literally wrote a column about how I helped a colleague get a top job because I did the extra equitable effort of encouraging that person. And so there's just something else about these communities too, where our welfare is also dependent on, how deeply rooted are we in our family dynamics? And is that a generational cycle of poverty or, of achievement? And that's where some of the American values really different from worldwide values. And you have to understand that, right? Because in America, like freedom of speech was super high on the scale with most of the other countries. That wasn't a priority value for them, right? But if you want to get them all, like you all said, like that idea of togetherness. And I love the internal comms, and that idea of integrating has to go across departments too. Like too often internal comms is in their own office on their own floor. They never talk with public affairs and who doesn't really meet with marketing or advertising. And they have all this same kind of communication coming out in different ways that doesn't feel trustworthy to consumers because it's inconsistent, or just it's a waste of resources a lot of times, right? Because there's a lot of intelligent minds that don't often come around and hear the different perspectives.
You know, you hit on something like, I think you, without even realizing I was going to ask this question, but I want to hear from the rest of the panelists. I was going to ask, what would you tell an up and coming new PR professional, what kind of skills to have? And I think you hit on quite a few. But Karen, I'd love to hear from you, maybe from a PR professional that's, you know, growing in Mexico or Central America. What kind of skill set? And then Ciro, from you as well, what would you tell them are the skill sets that they need to either break into the industry, whether it's a global agency like Porto Novelli or an independent agency, or one that's really looking at, you know, working in the US? Karen?
Sure. Yes, so I think talent is key. You know, we are service companies. We don't have products that we just sell and, you know, we package them, we give them away and they're done. You know, people like them or they don't. This is service, you know, and in the service industry, talent is key. So the way that I see the talent skills and the requirements, I see them in two areas. One are the hard skills and the soft skills. I'm a person that relies a lot on the soft skills in terms of the attitude, the style, the culture, the background. And I look for people that are flexible, because in the morning you can be working for a healthcare company. In the afternoon, you can be launching a new, you know, car or a new cereal or any food or consumer product. And then at night you can sit for 3 hours on a crisis for an airline. So you have to be flexible. You have to be open to learn from different industries, different sectors, and different disciplines. So we need people that are open-minded, that are ready to learn every day. In the soft skills part, I would say that we need people that can work, and I don't want this to sound as a cliche because it's not, that can work under a lot of pressure, under, you know, just understanding the responsibility you have when you write a statement or you write a speech. You know, it's not what you're writing, it's the impact that will have on the audience, and understanding that you need to be very sure of yourself and very humble. So those are the soft skills. And at Porto Novelli in Latin America, we, as you said, Latin people are very much into relationship, into what you feel when you meet someone, what is the connection you create, and that is more on the soft skills. However, we do look for definitely hard skills that people need to develop. People need to be strategic thinkers. They need to have analytical mindset and be able to read data and understand data and develop insights and intelligence coming out of that data. We need to have people that write really well, people that are bilingual or, you know, speak a couple of languages. In Latin America, the business world is, you know, it flows around English a lot, so people need to understand that. But I would say that the most important thing is about, you know, that attitude, that open mindset of learning, be flexible, be resilient, and be very focused on servicing clients, because it's a client service business.
Thank you. Well, I think you hit on all of those. I mean, those are all very key. I would probably said all of the same. Ciro, do you have any more that you would add to those?
I think that coming back a little bit about the Latinos, and Melissa mentioned that we are Latinos. We are used to relate with people. I have another joke talking to American friends. I always say that you guys in the US, very often say, well, to make a long story short, we in Latin America, we make short stories long. So we love to give details, to talk, to, you know, our meetings sometimes last 1.5 hours, something that Americans would reduce to 30 minutes maximum. So, you know, but this is the way it works. So I think that always the best thing is stay in the middle. So being focused, being straight to the point, but at the same time, be open to relate to people, to talk to people. And we are very good on that in Latin America. But I think that Amelia, you mentioned that what should I say to some people or people I want to hire? I always say that those people need to be very committed. And when I say committed, it's not only committed to be posted about, what CNN is showing on a television, or committed to trend topics on a Twitter, but being committed to different steps of all the process, learning, be open to learn all the time, be open to listen all the time. I had my best boss was the most, strong. He was so demanding. At the time, I hated him when I was an economic journalist, because he asked for details, double checking, triple checking. And I said, well, this guy is crazy. But after a while, I understand that he was talking about excellence. We need to pursue excellence. I do not accept nothing less than excellence. And it's not because I am like this. The world requires excellence. Whether you provide excellence or you are out, you will be out of the business. It is what it is. The bar is always going up and up and up. So I would say to people that I'm about to hire, I want to see you committed, looking for the best standards you can provide, given the best ideas, being committed to learn all the time, to listen all the time, and being flexible. So it's not easy, but it's the right formula for this challenging world we are living in.
Hopefully we haven't scared any potential new junior level public relations professionals.
No,
but I think you're right. I mean, I think
if we scare them, they're not ready for this profession. So.
Right. Well, and I think, Karen, you mentioned it, and now Ciro, you kind of reinforced it. It's like, it's that expectation that what we're, as spokespeople, or if we're preparing a spokesperson, what they are saying publicly, sometimes, and I have worked in catastrophe situations, can have a huge impact on what the public is perceiving, or information that, if you're asking people to move to an emergency situation. So yes, we do hold a lot of very important information that is critical to people, that can sometimes even be life-threatening or life-saving, right? So I agree. It is a very important role that we play for public. It is a relationship that we have with our publics, right? So I agree. Melissa, I'm going to turn it back to you, but I want to hear from Karen and Ciro as well before we finish out our hour. This has been a great conversation, and I think we've hit some really great points on the key trends. I think some things that have really stood out, especially around, the diversity and inclusion, internal communications, and that idea of purpose and culture, how to bring the right people on board, comes to mind the idea of mental health. Mental health has attracted greater attention across the globe, right? Including global industries in Latin America, in the United States, and Europe. Should we expect PR business leaders to continue to prioritize mental health? Or is this just a momentary thing that the PR industry has notoriously been bad at addressing mental health challenges? I mean, I think we all can admit, let's be honest with ourselves, that PR professionals work long hours, sometimes late, round the clock, with our clients. We are all about serving the client. You said, Karen, this is a service industry. Sometimes without a lot of show. We're not about the ego. We are behind the scenes professionals. So how do should PR professionals prioritize mental health? And then I'd love to hear from the rest, but I'm going to start with you, Melissa.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I can only imagine just putting the pieces of the puzzle together, like Ciro said, that the ramifications of what we've all been through globally in the last, I mean, what are we swinging around into year 3? The effects of those are going to be going on for years. I read a column just the other day and I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I've been saying. Like, to make it simple, people are kind of a hot mess right now. And what's been happening is that the fundamentals of our lives shifted, the priorities shifted, the needs shifted, and they haven't always fallen back in place for people. And in some good ways, and that's wonderful. Those are our silver linings, right? We're prioritizing maybe being outside more, our health, how we eat, our mental health. Are we getting rest? But on the flip side, like some things that were pretty normal in our everyday, like having a job and working, have been thrown out the window for some people, and in not always positive ways. So I would say, yes, we need to consider integrating mental health type communication, both reactive, which is what we've been doing, but more of that preventative in our mainstream communication. I have done internal comms myself, both for benefits and just general health and wellness programming. And preventative and proactive type communication, people can't measure it in the same way as what's reactive, right? But I would say, like, bake it into what you do, because that will be more socially responsible. That will make people feel like they're seen and heard and they belong, because a lot of these things around mental health, we don't always identify, right? And communicate about. So people have been brave enough to kind of share those kind of stories, and us, frontline workers in a different way. It's been a lot, right? It's been a lot. And a lot of the work I've done is more crisis communications than I've ever done in almost 2 decades of work in the last 2 years. A lot more issues management, and a lot more issues management in terms of just employee wellness and health and behaviors. So it's going to continue. And that is something that you need to try to be proactive about and bake into your strategy for sure.
What about in your countries, Karen, Ciro? I mean, because it's got to be different in Latin America, or is it the same? I mean, are your clients prioritizing? Is Porter Novelli as a major agency prioritizing? I know Melissa and Ciro, you guys are independent. You own your own agency, so it's slightly different. So Karen, I'm going to go to you, and then Ciro, I want to hear from you.
Sure. So we are prioritizing this issue. We are definitely making a lot of, taking a lot of actions. Again, it's not only about saying, it's about doing. We are taking a lot of action on mental health. I would like to say that we need to build an environment where the stress of the client work and the stress that the people are living at home, at least at the job, at the Porter Novelli time, they feel, that they are in a safe space that really takes care about them. We in Mexico, we were recognized by Ragan as with our wellness program, because we implemented last year a lot of measures. Like, for example, we're giving everybody like a fitness benefit to help them, continue their fitness programs at home. We put together a support group by psychologists and some therapists on, to support people on one-on-one sessions as needed to talk about the stress that they were facing. We implemented mentoring, but more mentoring and coaching programs, not only at the professional level, but if someone was really struggling with an issue, they could come to these mentors and coaches and talk to them. We implemented flexible, schedules. If people want to work at night or so, that's fine. We are not looking at, 8-hour a day time sheets. And from 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or 9 to 9, we are really looking and measuring people on results and giving a lot of flexibility. We put together a parent support group where we spoke 15 minutes, 20 minutes each week just to share how everybody was dealing with, homework and homeschooling and children at home. So some of them were local for, let's say, Mexico and Latam, others were global. But I think we run a satisfaction survey for employees every quarter. So we were measuring constantly what people were needing and how people were feeling supported. So I think you need to really create a culture where people feel they can raise their hands and they can say, I need help, without fear of losing their job or for the client to fire us. They can do that. They have a permission to raise their hand. So I think that's on the agency level. And quickly, I know we're almost over time. We need to see how we as agencies working with amazing companies and brands, we can influence others to do the same. It's not only doing it internally, but for example, in Brazil, we launched a movement called Mente en Foco together with the United Nations Pact and with the Brazilian Psychology Association to make, conferences and webinars and to educate companies on how to deal with mental health. And we even did like a movement to sign a pledge for companies to take measures internally to really prioritize the mental health of their employees. So it's not only coming back to what is our role as PR professionals. So if we can influence others to do the same, I think that's where we can really, really make an impact and have people feeling very proud of the work they do.
Yeah, we are the leaders that can lead the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ciro, tell me, what about in Brazil?
Well, we in my two agencies, we are very focused on the topic mental health. I think that there are a bunch of things that are here to stay. So corporate purpose and ESG, and the discussions about mental health and people and how to protect your team, how to make your team feel confident and happy. So we took some decisions. For example, we incentivize people to take some time during the day to stop, to relax, and to do everything other than working. So this is one topic. The second is, and this started before the pandemic, we have a short Friday system, rotation for people, and it's something that people really celebrate all the time. And during the pandemic, we hired a specialized firm to our professionals to access and to be able to have some therapy sessions and some services for well-being services, let's say that. And I think that companies, our clients all over the world, I think they have some challenges as well. It's coming back to offices or rebuild a system, and in order to offer a hybrid system. This is new for everybody all over the world. So the companies, they have some doubts, they have the need of external support. So we are working with some clients in order to help them to frame a new system in order for people to feel, safe and happy to be back to office, at least in a hybrid way. So it's new for everybody, and this is great because it's a global move, and everybody do need to think about new alternatives. So there are many things that are here to stay, And long story short, I think this is a great moment for PR because we can provide different views and options, alternatives and services for clients. And I think it's a great moment for our activity.
That is, I agree with you. And I think that's a great place to kind of wrap us up. I think though, before we leave, it would be great if I can, and I'm going to hold you guys to 30 seconds each to just kind of really quick recap your key trends. We want to make sure people walk away remembering what we've talked about. We've hit on it a lot, but I think they were so valuable, and I definitely think we're going to be hearing and seeing articles and studies about these. So Melissa, really quick, 30 seconds, highlight those 2 key trends you mentioned for us.
Integrate all the communication specialties and fields in your work. Don't just rely on one discipline to do all the lifting for you, and integrate across professionals and departments, and partner with other agencies if you can. And then number 2, really embrace culture and understand who you're working with, who you're working for, who you're trying to connect with, and what do they value. And then you'll be much better in terms of your communication strategy.
Great. Thank you. Ciro, 30 seconds.
Okay. I think that the main point is changes are here to stay. So be open to listen, to talk, to interact, to create and recreate, think and rethink about all alternatives. And second, look to the reality in a broader perspective. Think about your career, your activity as a big puzzle to be built.
Great. And Karen, we started with you and we're going to end with you. I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. As PR professionals, let's use our influence, our worth, our seat in the table to influence our companies to do 2 things. 1, to impact the society, the environment, and the communities that we operate on, and not think only about the clients and the money. And second, think about the employees. Go beyond internal comms to employee engagement, make them your advocates, and motivate them to be there with you in the future.
Wonderful. Purpose, employees, broader perspective were one big piece of the broader puzzle. Thank you everybody for joining us today. It was such a great discussion. Please make sure to go to PRCA America's website, which will be in the video description, for training, networking, events, and opportunities across the US and Latin America. And also mark your calendars for the 23rd and the 24th of March, where PRCA is hosting a flagship 2-day virtual international summit. So make sure to check the website for more information. We're so glad you joined us. Thank you for this great conversation.